A tiny home on wheels. A home that you built with your own hands that's mobile, where you can go take anywhere you want to enjoy your hobbies, see national parks, and just hit the road. I'm Paul Scheer, and I've been building camper vans for about 4 years now, and on this one in particular, I filmed everything. So sit back, relax, grab a coffee or a beer, and watch me restore this 2008 handicap shuttle van into my dream tiny home. So the very first thing I wanted to do was take the big, heavy handicap lift out of the van itself. So I first disconnected the battery so that way I couldn't zap myself while I'm unhooking the wires or unscrewing anything. So as I began to kind of tinker with it and toy around and look for the wires, I started to find all the connection points and just started disconnecting them and then following them to find out where they went so I could eventually just pull them out. So after tugging on some wires and finding where they went, I found the fuse in the hood right there and then was able to disconnect all of that, so then I would have no power going to the handicap lift and I could safely pull it out. I had a friend come and help me lift that thing out of there because it was so heavy, and I forgot to record it, but right here we actually have it out, and now we need to start getting those chairs out. In order for a van with seats like that to be DOT approved, they need to actually be bolted to the ground, as you see here. So there's a nut and a bolt that's fastening the seat to the actual frame of the van itself. And because I'm a one-man show, I kind of had to wedge a wrench onto one side so I could then go on the other side and actually unscrew it. But after a very long day of doing that, I was able to get these heavy bench seats out of the van. Now the next step that I actually kind of enjoy because it's mindless is just taking apart all this trim. So you basically just take your drill and you start unscrewing everything and just kind of carefully but also firmly just pulling on things until they come out. I like this because it's mindless. I'll put in my headphones, listen to some good tunes or maybe a podcast and just kind of start pulling away at all of this trim so I can actually start to get to the bare metal of the van. I knew I wasn't really going to be reusing any of this stuff except for the air condition unit back there, so I didn't have to really be careful trying to protect these trims. I just kind of started, like I said, I just started pulling on it, and then I had a big pile of junk in my garage when I was done. Since this was a shuttle bus, it had these ceiling lights, but I knew I wasn't going to use them because the ones I like are LED and they're super cheap, so I just kind of unhooked them, and then that enabled me to be able to actually pull this big ceiling piece off of the roof. A lot of this stuff is a lot easier with a partner, but if you just lift with your legs and you enjoy being alone with your headphones in, it's a pretty sweet gig. So now we can start to see the actual frame of the van itself, and we had some of this cheap insulation in here which I could have reused, but I already had a contract with a great insulation company called Havelock Wool, and I had planned on just fully insulating the van with that wool. Now because this was a handicap shuttle, once the wheelchair is in the van, they actually have to strap it to these tracks on the floor that are bolted to the floor of the van. And most of the nuts to this system were hidden behind the gas tanks and stuff, so I basically just had to take a drill and drill through them and destroy all of these nuts and bolts so I could take them off. But after a long sweaty day, I was able to get them out, and then I just started peeling the flooring off so I could see the screws and take off this old plywood that was screwed to the bottom of the van. Like I previously mentioned, a lot of this mindless work is actually some of my favorite work because it doesn't require any real thinking. You kind of just start chugging away at your task and you can just kind of daydream or, like I said, listen to something good. It's mindless work as opposed to problem solving, which I promise you there's a lot of problem solving to be done later on in the series. Because this bare metal is really never going to be seen again once I'm done with the build, I wanted to make sure it was nice and clean and rust free, so as you can see I just took some dish soap and kind of just squirted it around and splashed some water and scrubbed with a big brush there, but then I also kind of got on my hands and knees and really scrubbed with some rags. And for a lot of the surface rust that you see here, I just used a wire brush drill bit and just kind of grinded away at the rust until I could see some bare metal, so that way I could make sure that all the rust was gone and I wouldn't have to worry about it later on in the future. The dangerous and scary part of rust is that it spreads, so we want to make sure we get rid of all the rust that we can, and then once we have that bare metal exposed, the bare metal is also extremely vulnerable to rust when moisture gets on it. So what we're going to do is, once we get all that rust off there, we're going to clean it one more time, but then we're actually going to take some spray paint that's made for metal, and we're going to repaint all of that bare metal to ensure that we don't get rust on there again. Now, right here in the video, I don't realize how much rust I'm actually going to have to deal with later on, but this floor rust was nothing. So now we have to deal with all those holes in the floor where the nuts and the screws were going through to the bottom, and how we're going to do that is with this Bondo fiberglass. Now, this was a cool process for me because I had actually never used this stuff and it kind of scared me, but just like everything else I've learned in the last handful of years is there's always a solution and there's always someone willing to teach you how to do it, whether online or in person, and this stuff was actually really easy to use. You just follow the instructions on how much to mix with the hardener versus the Bondo, and then you saturate the area and cut the fiberglass cloth into the desired size, and then you put the cloth on top of the saturated area, and then you just saturate that again, and then you do 2 layers of that, and after a couple hours you have a fully hard piece of fiberglass that's patching whatever hole you're trying to repair. So this took a little while, but I successfully patched the probably 120 or 130 holes in the bottom of my floor with this fiberglass material, and that way I know that moisture can't ever get back up into the van. And now, to take a little break from the manual labor, we're going to install this rear view display camera, since the rear view mirror is not really going to be useful because we're not going to be able to look through the whole van once the build is complete. So we're going to figure out where we wanted that camera in the back, and then we're going to run the wire through the van up to the actual display mirror itself. So just like any other wire, we're going to hide it underneath trim or behind the walls and feed it right there where we're going to have our display. This thing is super cool. It looks like a rear view mirror, but it's actually a screen. And what you're going to do is strap it to your other mirror, and then you hook up all the wires, and then you have a rear view display showing you exactly what that camera is looking at. So I went ahead and used this 12-volt power system that it comes with. You could also hardwire it to your fuse box, but I went ahead and just used the 12-volt plug-in. And we're just going to try our best to hide the wire within the trim here, just like every other wire. And then we're going to run it up here and then loop it through the top trim, going all the way over to the display where we're eventually going to plug it in. So now we have a sweet backup camera as well as a rear view display that's shown right there on the rear view mirror. So I used the adhesive and stuck the camera into place, and then I actually ended up putting some screws in there as well. And then we're just going to add this last piece, which is a GPS tracker that, as far as I know, it just gives you the compass heading on the display. Then we're just going to take some zip ties and just clean up the wires and snip them so they're nice and neat. Be sure to tune in next week where we actually start cutting some wood. We install our studs to the metal of the van, as well as apply our sound deadening pads to reduce the noise. And then I actually travel all the way up to Oregon to work with AM Solar to install a professional electrical kit where we put the solar on the roof, we cut some holes in the van for the shore power, and we put together this super nice professional electrical box that's going to power our whole tiny home. If you're interested in learning how to build out your own camper van, I actually built a resource that I wish I had when I started. It's a step-by-step program that walks you through how to do everything in your van build and includes electrical diagrams and how to do the plumbing and woodworking. So be sure to check out my website that'll be linked down below.